In this video, we're going to get an overview of the Amazon Sumerian editor user interface. We'll also show you how to move around your camera. Let's get started.
All right, so I have already created a new scene, and let's talk about what we're actually looking at and the different panels available to us. Now, first off, in the middle here, this is called the canvas. Some people call it the viewport. Either name works, but really what it is, it's the place where you can view and look at your 3D environment. I'm using what's called an orbit cam right now. So the camera is really orbiting around a center point, and I do this with my mouse or my trackpad, or the equivalent of. By using my mouse, I'm holding down my right mouse button, and I am then dragging my mouse around. That's how I'm kind of orbiting around this, what looks like this kind of cross part in the grid. That's where it's really focused on. And that is really where I'm orbiting around. If I want to pan, what I do is I hold Shift and Option, and then my left mouse button, and I can go up, down, left, and right. That is how I control the mouse. I can also zoom in and zoom out. All right, so that is the canvas. Now, what I see in the canvas, you'll notice there are two entities right here. Really what these are, if I highlight them. Another thing is if I want to select entities, I can drag the mouse. And I'm looking at my lights. These are entities. And this takes us to the entities panel over here on the left-hand side. The entities panel holds everything that is in your scene, and you can anything you select in the canvas, you will have selected in the entities panel, like these lights. Now let's talk about a few other things. So let's talk about the first, which is this intro course live node, or the top level entity. If I select that, this is really my global settings for my scene. If I select the top tab over here, I can change the name if I like, or give it a description, add some key value pairs, as well as some tags. Under AWS configuration, when I use integrated services like AWS or Amazon Poly, Amazon Alex, or AWS IoT, I would need to enter in a Cognito identity pool. That's where I would do it there. I also have environment settings, so I can change the color of my background to white if I want. I don't need to do that. I'll just revert back or undo. And also add skyboxes, sky spheres, post effects. If I want to calculate my scene size, I can do that right here as well. So that's what happens when you select the top level entity. And this takes us to really what is this panel over here. This is the inspector panel. Now, if I select other entities over here in the entities panel, it'll change the inspector panel. So if I select the default lights, which is really just a holder of these actual light entities, and when I select those lights, you see I get different settings, like a light component. And if I select a camera, then I get a camera component. And no matter what entity I have selected, I can always add more entities. And so if I want to add a light entity to a camera, or if I want to add a timeline or a state machine, which we'll get plenty of experience with in this video course, that is where I would do it, is by selecting Add Component. All right, so we have covered the viewport of the canvas, the entities panel, the inspector panel, which is where we do a lot of the editing for our entities. Down here in the bottom left-hand corner is the assets panel. The assets panel is really the library that contains all the raw files that are being used in your scene. Some of these might be entities that you can select in the entities panel, others will not. We'll get a lot more comfortable with the entities panel and how it works in different asset types as we move along through the course. So we're not going to get into a lot of detail right now. Let's next look at these two buttons and options that really will open some libraries for us up here at the top. I'm first going to click on Import Assets. This will open up an asset library that we have access to, a bunch of different assets like hosts, the centrifugal pump, which is really going to be the main focus of this course, so I'll add that later. There are some PBR material packs, some 360-degree files, and a lot of other things. This is also where I would, if I want to import something from my computer, I could click Browse and I could find the directory of the file and import it that way. I'll click Cancel so that we will get, again, more comfortable with the Import Assets library. Also over here is the Create Entity button. If I select this, this gives us a small library of entities we can use that are oftentimes or mostly primitives or 2D shapes. There's the Others category, which is like particles, timeline, HTML 3D, as well as an entity. The entity is really just an empty entity that contains nothing. So it's really just like a file or a container to group other entities. Also, we have different types of lights. We'll look at lights in another video. as well as different types of cameras. We're not really going to be covering different types of cameras in this video, but I will say the orbit cam is the cam we're going to be using. So we're always going to, whether it's a published scene or in the editor mode, we're going to be using a camera that orbits around the scene, focusing on a center point that can pan left or right, up or down, as I showed you, but it is an orbit cam. All right. The next thing we want to do, I should have actually just clicked create entity and then add an entity. I'm going to go ahead and select this quad because I'm going to use this in the next video. So now I have a quad in the video, or in the middle, I'm sorry, of the canvas. And you'll notice it has some gizmos attached to it, or these handles. I can move this entity by selecting and holding and moving around these gizmos. And so I can place it in different position within my scene. So right now I'm using what's called the translation gizmos. I'm going to open up the transform component. And once I do that, you'll see I have all these transform settings. So if I select it and move it, you see how these values are changing when I do that. I can also select different types of transform gizmos. So right now I have the translation transforms. That's really the position of it, or its location within the scene. If I select the rotation handles or gizmos, it gives me these rings, which will allow me to rotate my entity however I want. And you see how it's always updating those values on the rotation line. If I click scale, this allows me to adjust the scale manually of the object. The Z value doesn't really matter for a quad. So that is really for the most part, what we need to know for these buttons up here, these translation or transform buttons or option buttons. Also, another one that's kind of important, if you don't want to see the grid, you can always toggle on and off the grid by clicking this little hash looking button. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you join us in our next video where we will cover importing objects, adding some entities and adjusting them to create an environment or a 3D environment for our scene.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments of this video. If you haven't already, please join also our Sumerian community on Slack at slack.sumerian.world.